Today we'll understand the difference between front-end and back-end testing, and in order to understand that, let's start with understanding what is a front-end. So this is an Amazon website which I have opened via Chrome browser. It can be opened by any browser. So this is how I'm going to interact. This is my user interface, and I'm going to select items via this interface. So this is my front end. I can search for some items here. I can go to some specific items. I can filter through these items and add them in the cart. I can go to the cart, add items, delete items, save them for later, right? So all this can be done through this front end. So this is my front end, and front end is developed by front end developers, either using they'll use HTML, CSS, JavaScript for the base, and some front-end technologies like Angular and React for creating the entire website, right? So now the information that I see on this particular website, it has to come from somewhere, right? This mobile, what is the cost of the mobile, the reviews. The information that I see on the front end comes from the back end. Okay, so to look at it in a very simple manner, as a user, I am looking at the front end, okay, using a browser, and whenever I request for some information related to a product, an API is called, which is an application programming interface. It goes to the back end, which then interacts with the database, could be a SQL database or a NoSQL database. That information is provided, some business logic runs on it, which could do some filtering, some truncation, parsing, and then that response is provided to front end, which then shows it to the user. Okay, the backend could also interact with some other services, related to location or some third party systems as well, before it for providing the information to front end. Okay, so the front end is the user interface, and the back end are the APIs that we will test. So if you look at the front end, when I do front end testing, it basically checks, can I put data, for example, can I search the data here, can I click on some elements, can I do the filtering correctly, right? So all that is covered in front end, and also the entire user flow from selecting a product, in this example, from selecting a product to buying the product, making the payment successfully. Apart from this, if you click on function F12, you will see some tabs here, the network tab. So every time a website loads, there are some API calls that are made. So during front-end testing, you will also check the network tab to ensure that there are no errors. Sometimes even if the website loads correctly, there might be some errors here, which is it's a good idea to show it to raise defects and show it to developers. It could be some information that is not visible but had to be there, right? And if there is an error, it is important to find whether it is a front end issue or a back end issue. So when you look at the network tab and you look at some APIs, you will see the response, and the response will tell you, it might give you an error, and then you know that, okay, this is a backend issue. So it was caught on the front end, but it's a backend issue. So when you do front end testing, you will also check at the network tabs, the performances. Okay, and if you want cookies, you will access the application tab, that is cookies. So this can be done, this can be used for API testing as well, right? So this is covered under front end testing. To do backend testing, this is done using tools like Postman or SOAP UI, and this is to test APIs. You can see a Postman application which is used for testing APIs. So using this is nothing but backend testing, where you are testing the APIs, directly hitting the APIs by providing some values, some authorization, some headers that are required for that particular API. And what is required for that API, that will be provided in the Swagger documentation or the design document if it's a new API that is developed, right. So, if you look at this diagram, the simple diagram, development is always done from right to left. That means if there is some changes in the database, it will be done first, then some business logic, API development, and then the front end. So, when you test the APIs before you test the front end, and just testing the APIs, that is, maybe creating some resources, ensuring the mandatory parameters are if the mandatory parameters are not provided, then you get the appropriate errors. Errors are understood properly, the message is correct, the return code is correct, and when a resource is created correctly, when you get the resource, the data is also correct, the dates, the values that you provided, it is populated in the correct fields. So, all that information you can check, all that logic you can check using APIs. So, that is done by backend testing, where you are checking that the data that you enter, the resources that you create are populated correctly in the database, and you get that information correctly. And on the front end, when you load the front end, the data is provided by the backend correctly to front end. But apart from that, we also check that on the front end whether the website is easy to use, like the user experience, like is the data consistent, are the tabs having the correct the font size are consistent across the different tabs, is the UI easy to use. Can we imagine like this cart can be accessed from any of the tabs. Imagine if the cart was missing and every time you wanted to go to the cart, you had to go to the home page. That would not be a good user experience. So, all that is tested, and suggestions or errors or defects that you observe are raised in front end testing. Okay, so this is basic details of front end and back end, and we can look at the different points, like testing the UI and UX and client side behavior is front end, whereas the back end is called the server side also. So, it is testing the server side logic, database and APIs that power the applications. The focus area in front end testing is the look and feel, okay, and how whether it is working as per the functionality. If there are some fields which are numeric, then you should not be able to add alphabets there, right. So, all that is covered in the focus area of front end testing. And database, the back end testing is the integrity of the data, the correct data is getting loaded, you are getting the information correctly, that is back end. What is to be tested? The different aspects, buttons, forms, responsive design, page rendering, and in case of backend, you have APIs, the database, the CRUD operations, the authentication, authorization, business flows, the performance under load, all this comes under backend testing. Now, tools, so we use Selenium. Selenium is most widely used now, but now also Playwright is becoming very popular. So, these tools are used for front end testing. Browser stack and Lambda test, these are paid tools which allow you to test on multiple browsers, on multiple devices, mobile devices. Okay, so that is for extensive front end testing. And for the back end, you use tools like Postman, SOAP UI, Rest Assured for the automation using Java, JMeter for performance. So, all this is for the backend. And data handling works with displayed data. So, you provide the data in the different tables, the blocks, and this is with the stored and processed data. And typical issues that you will find in front end testing is a broken UI. The UI is not loading properly, the links are broken, the elements are not proper, the error messages, you don't understand what the error messages are. Browser inconsistency, works on Chrome, does not work on Firefox, this is very common. and in case of backend is incorrect data is saved. You provide some data, but what you get is different. API returning wrong response, the performance bottleneck, security flaws. If you will not have the permission, maybe there is different kind of users that can access a particular API. You know, some maybe only an admin is allowed to create a resource, but even as a user you are able to create or modify the resource. So these security flaws also you need to test via APIs. And from a tester's perspective, you know, does the app work as the user sees it, and this does the app work correctly behind the scenes. So the data integrity, and this is the user feel, right? So this is basically the difference between front end and back end testing.